Thanks, everyone, for taking the time to join us for this session on the digital empire, where we'll be covering three different online primary source collections for researching the history and legacies of colonialism. You saw my face a little bit earlier today, and I hope it's okay, Caroline, that I included you here as well. So my name is Laura Blumval, and I'm a product specialist at Adam Matthew Digital. So I did a PhD actually in English literature at University of York, and I've been teaching undergraduates for a few years when I was doing my PhD. I still research and publish publications in peer-reviewed journals and in collections of essays, but I also work for Adam Matthew, helping students get to grips with primary sources and learn how to incorporate those in their dissertations. And a big thanks to Caroline, who's the academic support librarian for some of you in certain subject areas. I know history and classics and archaeology and a few other areas. I'll put a link at the end so you can know which your right subject librarian is. And if you have any questions at all that come during the session, I'm always happy for you to email me and have a one-on-one chat about what your research topic is. So just let me know if you have any questions, and we'll have plenty of time for a Q&A towards the end of this as well. So I just want to start this presentation with this quote that you may have seen on the blurb for this session as well. So this quote is from John Stuart Mill, who some of you may know is a 19th century philosopher, political economist and civil servant. And he was famous for as a proponent of the utilitarian school of ethics, as well as women's suffrage and a theory of political liberty. But what some of you may not know is that he also spent 35 years working as a colonial administrator in the East India Company from when he was about 17 years old in 1823, and he worked there until 1858 when the company was abolished in favour of direct rule by the British Crown over India. And in this quote, he says that the whole government of India is carried on in writing. All the orders are given and all the acts of the executive officers are reported in writing, and the whole of the original correspondence is sent to the home government, so that there is no single act done in India, the whole of the reasons for which are not placed on record. So when we start thinking about how do we start researching the history and legacies of European colonialism, how do historians know what the British did in India? The way we know this is because we have all of this first-hand evidence, and because the British Empire, which was made of many things, was also one of the key things that it was made of also was paper. And if we think about where all of these papers are held today, where are all of these records that were kept from about the British Empire today? This is a picture on the right-hand side of the India Office records, where all of the paperwork of the East India Company from the centuries that it had that huge influence over such a huge sphere of the globe are kept today in the British Library. And what we do as a publisher, so what we do at Adam Matthew, is that we go to these museums, these archives, and libraries, and we digitize these rare manuscripts, printed books and records, and make them available digitally so you can access them from your laptop. And these India Office records were digitized in our East India Company collection, for example. And at the University of Edinburgh, you have access to a huge range of primary sources of this kind that you can study the history of empire and the legacies of colonialism, but also many other topics. So anything from, you can see Victorian popular culture there, which covers the history of circus and spiritualism, and Victorian early cinema, music hall shows. We also have Church Missionary Society periodicals, which is a really incredible resource for studying the history of Christian influence across the globe from the 1800s up to the late 20th century. We have Mass Observation Online, which is a kind of social history collection, and medieval and early modern rare manuscripts. But what I wanted to focus on today is three collections and show you how you might get started navigating these collections in your research, depending on time and how much we get to cover today, because I want to leave time for your questions at the end as well. So I'm going to start with 19th Century Literary Society, then look at Empire Online, and if we have time, also at Foreign Office Files for China. So let me just leave this presentation. And you should see now 19th Century Literary Society, the homepage on your screen. If you're not seeing it, just unmute yourself and let me know, and I'll figure out if I'm sharing the wrong screen. So just to let you know a little bit about what this project is. So 19th Century Literary Society allows you to discover the work of one of the world's most important publishing dynasties through this collection from the historic John Murray Archive. And this is held by the National Library of Scotland, and it was added to the UNESCO Register of World Memory in 2011, which really reflects how the Murray collection comprises one of the world's most important literary archives. And it covers a range of genres, from book history to travel writing, politics and poetry, but it's really across all of those genres presents an unparalleled repository of 19th century culture and the literary luminaries who shaped it. And just to give you a sense of some of the highlights included here, we have the annotated drafts of Lord Byron. There's a completed first edition file copy of On the Origin of Species and related correspondence from Charles Darwin. There's rare correspondence from Jane Austen and her family. And we also have really exciting correspondence from the 19th century female explorer Isabella Bird from her travels in America, Australia, and the Far East. But what I'm going to show you first is in this research tool, we actually have the curator from the John Murray Archive talk about the significance of this for your research. And because he's worked with these documents for decades, I just wanted to for you to hear in his voice first why this is such an important archive to research.
The importance of the John Murray Archive was recognised by UNESCO when it was inscribed in their Memory of the World Register. Is this one of the greatest archives? Perhaps so. Not only is there well-known stories which can be retold through the archives, but there's hundreds, perhaps thousands of untold stories. This really is a researcher's goldmine, waiting to be rediscovered. Perhaps you will be the first person to read that letter since it was penned over 100 or 150 years ago. Different stories from known and unknown people. Claims that this is the greatest archive can be easily substantiated. What other family could bring together such a diversity of characters over such a wide period of time? You have here people who are famous in literature, famous in science, famous in politics, famous in every human endeavour. No single family, no single company, apart from the Murrays, apart from publishing, could possibly bring together such a diversity of interesting characters.
And you can hear all the rest of the interview here, and you can also read it and download it as a PDF if you want to hear more from David Maclay on the importance of the John Murray Archive. And just to give you an idea of the kind of layout of a standard Adam Matthew collection, so we have, when you open the navigational bar here, you can see all of the main pages of the database. So we have all this introductory information over here. Sorry, I just need to let someone in again. So in these introductory pages, you can see the nature and scope, which gives you information about the selection criteria, what papers we selected to digitize, and also importantly, what was excluded and why. It kind of gives you a really overview of the importance of the John Murray Publishing House and what it is. And it's a really good place to get started if you're new to the archive. There's also guides to the different themes that are covered in the collection, information about the scholars and academics who helped us choose the material and who worked with us in the editorial board. There's more information about the Byron papers and National Library of Scotland, and then other kind of introductory features. Then there's the documents next to the introductory pages, and this is the really kind of heart and soul of any Adam Matthew collection. This is where you go to the primary sources and encounter those primary documents from the archive. And there's a few different ways that you can browse them. You can browse by author, by theme, or by document type. And you can also look at the kind of key figures. So if you're just interested in Jane Austen or interested in Lord Byron or Charles Darwin, you can go to the key figures section and start your research that way. And then we have all of these research tools, which are kind of secondary features that I will show you a little bit later. There's the video introduction that I've just shown you, and also academic essays, and I will show you the life cycle of the book feature in a second. So what I'm going to go to first are these search directories. So in any Adam Matthew collection, there's 3 different ways that you can search the collection. There's this search bar where you can just enter basic search terms and run that search across all of the collection. We have an advanced search page, and this is really useful if you have different filtering options that you want to apply and different restrictions and multiple different terms, and you have a very detailed research question in mind with several parameters that you want to apply. This is, if that's the case, this is a really good place for you to go. And what I'm in right now are the search directories. So these allow, all of the documents have been indexed according to keywords and people, and you can use those keywords and select them over here. And I'm just going to go to people. And these are tailored, by the way, for any collection to kind of really reflect what the content there is. So if you went to a different collection, like one of our medical history collections, you could, in the search directories, would be organized by medical illness and different types of diseases. If you went to Shakespeare's Globe Archive, you could then you could look at different productions and authors and actors and directors, or seasons or Shakespeare plays. And there's different ways, but the search directories are always kind of curated to really reflect the strengths of each of the databases. And I'm just going to go to the letter L and go to Livingston. And I'm going to press this plus button to add David Livingston as my search term, and then press search. Okay, so we now have all of the results that we get for David Livingston, and we have all of these filtering options on the left-hand side if you want to narrow down your results further. So you can narrow down by date, by theme, or by document type. And I'm just going to choose as a theme travel and the world, because we're interested in colonialism and the empire. And as a document type, I'm going to choose illustrations. So let's say I've got a research project and I'm particularly interested in illustrations of the empire and of the history of the colonialism. And I'm going to start my research this way, and just going to press apply to apply those restrictions. So now we got 8 results, so we've kind of narrowed down the search significantly. And for those of you who don't know, I'm sure some of you are familiar with David Livingstone, but he was a Scottish physician. He was born in Blantyre, just southeast from Glasgow, and he was also a Christian missionary in Africa who achieved near mythic status in Victorian Britain for his exploration of Africa. And I'm just going to choose this one. So this is a marked proof engraving, Reception of the Missions by Shinte. So a little bit about this document, the published edition of Livingstone's missionary travels. So famous, would include 47 illustrations in total. And many of these were reprinted in popular periodicals, including as well as in magic lantern slides. And these really helped to popularize David Livingstone's exploits in Africa, in Britain and beyond. And this is actually an illustration of the local Shinte or Shinde tribesmen. And if you read the letter that goes together with this illustration, which is also included in this database, you can see some of the context to Livingstone's notations here. So this is the illustration, and you can see all of these pencil marks around it. And within this letter that accompanied this illustration, Livingstone was very disparaging of the artist's work. And you can see these engravings here on the top. I'm just going to zoom in, make this full screen and zoom in a little bit so you can see it better. So here he said, for the Shinte tribesmen, they have to include many more rings on their legs and arms. So he's not happy. If you look at the tribesmen here, he's not happy about the number of rings that are included around the wrists and the ankles of the tribesmen. And he includes that as a kind of an editorial comment to this picture. And then we have in a second hand, which we think is by John Murray, the publisher, which asks the artist to make that revision. So it says, please place more rings on the chief arms and legs up to the knees and elbow. So where Livingstone was asking for all the tribesmen to have more rings, John Murray has asked for the chief to only have more rings, and he specified the length of those. And the reason that these illustrations are really important is because of the colonies of the British Empire. In the minds of the ordinary Victorian men and women were often these images and literary descriptions that really captured the public's imagination, and which underpinned then the ideologies that justified the exploitative practices of colonization. And looking at these draft illustrations and the different stages that they went through and the detailed process in which these images and depictions were brought to the public really gives you an insight into how those kind of fantasies of of British colonies were brought to the British public at the time. And if you want to find out more about this document, you can actually go to the research tools over here. And we have this life cycle of the book feature. You explore more of the publication project, which we've developed with the scholars who helped us develop this resource. So we really talk about the journey of the missionary travels from the kind of manuscript stage to some suppression and censorship, and the illustrations and editing process to finally making it to the bookstores, people buying it, and the sales figures, and what the bestseller kind of status of this work did for the publishing archive and for David Livingstone's reputation. And I'm just going to jump now to the second database I wanted to show you today. So this is Empire Online, and let me just find my notes. So this resource brings together manuscript, printed and visual primary source materials for the study of empire and its theories, practices and consequences. And the materials span across the last 5 centuries, and they contain material from 13 archives, including the Regions Beyond Missionary Union archive from the University of Edinburgh, as well as a smaller number of documents from 14 other supporting archives. So I'm going to go now to the popular searches over here again. This is a really good place to generally to start your research journey. So this is kind of similar to the search directories, an alternative name for it in a way. And I'm going to go to the topic of the Boers. So now we can see all the kind of the results that have been indexed with this term within content within this database. And I'm just going to open this one in a new tab. So this is called The Gordon Highlander, and it's a children's adventure story from 1901 by E. Evergreen. And this is children's adventure stories in general are a really rich subgenre that's represented in Empire Online. And the adventure stories are really important in that they kind of really dramatize British ideals for young readers and project them towards these impressionable young children. And the really enthusiastic readers of these books were those who were also most likely to take them to heart and to believe them. And if I go just back to this, this was one of the illustrations at the beginning of the book. And if I go back to the main document, you have all of the metadata over here underneath the document. But you also have all of the search hits over here. So you can see how the Boers were depicted within this children's book. So we see on image 8 really early on, they say, "Don't let the Boers kill you, Daddy," he said with a little catch in his voice. There's some discussion about what brutes the Boers are to the natives and how they bully and oppress everybody not Boer. So you can kind of see, you can kind of get a little bit of from this snippet of the context of each of the search results. And if you click on any of these results, it will take you to that page. And that will really kind of give you a sense of the type of narrative that's building around this topic for in this children's book. But then if I wanted to kind of look at the way they're depicted by other voices, I could go to this fourth result, Moody, which is an epic of South African native life. And the reason this is an important comparative document is because this is actually by a South African politician instead of being by an English children's author. And he spent much of his life struggling for the enfranchisement and liberation of the African people. And this novel is actually of kind of historic significance because it is the first one to be written by a Black South African author in English. And the author of this book was also a journalist and an author, and he spoke multiple languages. And in addition to writing original works in English, he also translated Shakespeare into Tswana, which is a Bantu language spoken in southern Africa. And again, you can see the search results over here, and I'm just going to go to the first one with 3 search results. So within this South African book, it talks about how the Boer leader is actually speaking here rather than the child and the English soldier heading off to fight them. And he says that there are always 2 points of view. The point of view of the ruler is not always the viewpoint of the ruled. We Boers are tried of foreign kings and rulers. We only want one ruler, and that is God, our creator. So you can start getting a slightly more balanced view and a different perspective from a different voice. And that's the real strength of this database. If you're interested in a certain period in colonial history or the history of any European empire, you can get different alternative voices on the same period of history and base your research on that comparison. And because we kind of have 12, let me just check the time. Yes, we have a little bit of time, but I think I also want to leave some time for the Q&A at the end. So I might just leave Foreign Office Files for China for today. What I just wanted to say about this is that this is kind of much more modern period of history, and Archives Direct is really the platform where this collection sits. It's really one of the most kind of important archives if you wanted to start studying political history or the history of international relations. This includes a huge amount of Foreign Office files and Commonwealth files from the British government, which have been digitized in UK, kind of the Britain's the kind of government different regions in the world. So in the case of Foreign Office Files for China, this includes formerly restricted British Foreign Office files that deal with China, Hong Kong and Taiwan from 1919 to 1980. And they feature document types like diplomatic dispatches, letters, newspaper cuttings, political pamphlets, court cases and other materials. And it kind of represents this constant exchange of information between London and the British embassies and consulates. And because of the really, say, unique nature of the relationship between Britain and China, these formerly restricted first-hand accounts provide a really unprecedented level of detail into a really turbulent period in Chinese history. And the layout, as you can see, is slightly different to the other collections that we saw. But if I go to the collection, I can show you that very quickly. So all of the kind of introductory material to Foreign Office Files for China are here. So you can go to the introduction and the nature and scope section over here. There's also, you can use this to go to the essay, the scholarly essay associated with this collection, then start looking at the documents and the popular searches as well. And there's an interactive world map over here. And the reason there's 2 different bars is because you can either look at the documents only contained in Foreign Office Files for China if you want to limit your search that way. But because Archives Direct contains many different collections, there's also a separate one for searching the entire platform and portal at once. And I'm just going to show you a few kind of closing slides before we go to the Q&A, and where you can ask your questions about these primary sources. So we covered kind of 2 collections and a third collection really quickly, and I kind of wanted to show you that the kind of tiles that you saw earlier actually include many more databases that we could have studied. It was really hard to pick only 2 or 3 collections to show you today. And I'd really urge you to kind of look at the different collection titles and information about what they contain to choose the right database for you to start your research journey. So these are only a few images of the types of databases that I didn't get to cover today. So on the left-hand side, you can see a performance photograph of the Zulu Macbeth, which is contained in Shakespeare's Globe Archive, if you're interested in looking at the way kind of race differences and the history of colonization and the empire were depicted in theatre and in contemporary performances of early modern texts that often deal with these histories in a problematic and difficult way. We also have this Story of China pamphlet, which comes from the China Culture and Society collection. If you're interested in Western pamphlets from China from the 19th century and early 20th century. There's also this magazine periodical next to it, which is in our service newspapers of World War II collection. And this is actually a periodical that was published for Indian soldiers in Urdu, Hindi and English in this database. And you can see the kinds of news that Indian soldiers would have been reading during the Second World War through these periodicals. And then the final image is from Church Missionary Society periodicals. And the first overseas mission of Church Missionary Society was in Sierra Leone in 1804. But soon after that, the society CMS was working in other African countries as well, the Mediterranean, the Middle East, Asia, Oceania, and the Americas. So the periodicals that they published offer a really unique perspective on a very global history and history of encounters between Christian societies and local populations, which presents a very kind of different type of perspective and insight into the history of empire and colonialism. And in order to find and access all of these databases, the simplest way for you to find these material is to go to MyEd. So you can find access to these databases either through the database links, which are over here, or you can go to the database A to Z as well and go to the subject guides over here. So there's 2 different ways that you can kind of enter most easily these databases. And that kind of journey is, thanks to Caroline for creating this slide, is kind of laid out here. And I'm sure your subject librarian would be also happy to talk to you. So if you have any more questions, if you want to kind of some help finding the right database for you, or you want some help locating some more specific documents that would tie in with your dissertation topic, I'm always really happy to be contacted. My email is laurab@amdigital.co.uk, and I can have a one-on-one meeting with you and or email with you and try to find you the right documents that you might need. And you can also go to your page for academic support librarians, which you can see over there, and I've also included the URL, and that list will list all of the different subjects at the University of Edinburgh and the right subject support librarian for you. And I'm sure they'd be really delighted as well if you got in touch with them and asked them any questions. And that kind of ends the presentation section that I had prepared today. Thank you everyone for joining us for this session.